Epstein, he comes from the heart of the Zionist movement. Definitely Israel intelligence adjacent, and it speaks to the possibility of so many other blackmail options against Trump and raises so many questions.
So recently, Max Blumenthal went on Judge Napolitano's show to talk a little bit about the stakes regarding the Epstein story, the cover-up, how it's developing, how it's hurting Trump, and the Israel and Epstein connection that is being lost in a lot of the mainstream discourse about the Epstein story. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Does Epstein fit into any of this geopolitically? Not Epstein the person, Epstein the saga.
For sure. I mean, it's not being dramatized that way by the opinion makers, which now are the Beltway media, who are questioning Trump about Epstein everywhere he goes and eliciting some very revealing responses, as we just saw on Air Force One.
Yes.
Or by the Democrats, who finally decided to talk about Epstein. I don't know why they didn't do it during the presidential campaign when they're supposed to make their case about Trump. Maybe, I don't know. It would have complicated the primetime final DNC speech by Bill Clinton, but they finally decided to use it as a point of attack on Trump, and it's falling on fertile soil. But there's another element to it. I think you interviewed Ryan Dawson.
Yes.
Whitney Webb has talked about this, and we've talked about it at the Gray Zone, which is that Epstein, he comes from the heart of he comes from the heart of the Zionist movement. And he was hooked up with this socialite, Ghislaine Maxwell, whose father was a key mover for Israeli intelligence, was extremely influential in European politics, got a de facto state funeral in Israel attended by current and former Mossad chiefs. How did she just wind up in his midst? He was the money manager for Les Wexner, who's doesn't just help dominate Ohio politics and the key swing state of the U.S., basically controls Ohio State University, former CEO of Victoria's Secret, but also uses his money on behalf of Israel.
Yes, certainly so. There's no doubt that the documented evidence shows that Epstein had many connections to not only Israel, but people in Israeli intelligence or involved as Israeli assets, including Adnan Khashoggi and Douglas Leese, who were moving arms during the Iran-Contra scandal, another thing that doesn't get talked about a lot. But Max is right, the Democrats are taking advantage of this, and that's only Trump's fault that he's withheld this information, and that had to be anticipated, that the Democrats, if they smelled weakness on the part of Trump and lack of transparency despite his promises, they're going to take advantage of this politically. And don't get me wrong, many of them are acting in that way. Chuck Schumer is raising this rule of 5 methodology to try to unveil the Epstein files. I don't think that will work. I think that's a dead end. Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna have a discharge petition in hopes to force a vote for this when the Congress reconvenes in August. I hope that happens. I think that's a genuine effort. But, they're just hoping, the regime right now is hoping that this story goes away by the time that Congress reconvenes. And Mike Johnson was totally absurd to say, hey, it'll be painful to the victims if we release this information. It's like, no, Scoundrel Johnson, this would be painful to the perpetrators, not the victims. And I want answers regardless of who's trying to track them down at this point. I don't care if the Democrats or the Republicans are the political beneficiaries of this. The stakes are too high, not only in terms of the sex trafficking operation that involved prominent people, but also the connections to intelligence, which could be embarrassing to America and America's relationship with Israel.
And was one of the founding members of the Mega Group in 1998, a constellation, or you could even call it, if you want to be more dark about the whole thing, a cabal of 50 Zionist billionaires who are committed to advancing the cause of Israel in the United States. I think Jared Kushner's father was a member of this as well. So Epstein was in the middle of all this. He was very close to Alan Dershowitz, who's Israel's lawyer, was almost appointed to be UN ambassador to Israel by Netanyahu. Epstein had relationships with 4 former 3 former Israeli prime ministers. Ehud Barak was his buddy, and he arranged a meeting with JP Morgan executives for Netanyahu, or for those executives with Netanyahu. What I mean, if he were alive today and he weren't a target of so many legal dramas and legal intrigues, he would have been campaigning alongside Les Wexner and Alan Dershowitz to crush the student protesters at Harvard and Ivy League universities.
Yeah, I mean, his money went toward those sorts of things. And for reference point earlier, when he talked about the formation of the mega group, one of the key movers involved in that was Les Wexner, who inexplicably gave Epstein absurd amounts of money just out of nowhere for no real reason other than that Epstein was going to be his money manager. And there's no real reason to think that Epstein ever invested any of the money that he was handling for Wexner. But nonetheless, Wexner did sign over power of attorney to Epstein so he could make key decisions, take out loans in his name, be representative of Les Wexner in the legal realm. Wexner had people at his companies, Victoria's Secret, there were Abercrombie and Fitch, Bath and Body Works. He owned all the L brands. Some of those executives came to Wexner and said, hey, who is this guy? Why is he running the show? Where did he come from? What's his role? And some of them actually got frozen out. So yeah, Epstein was connected to all these causes for long periods of time. By the way, Wexner also gave Epstein, again, inexplicably, the biggest private property in Manhattan, a $77 million mansion there. That was one of his key properties. So there's so many unanswered questions here, and a lot of it is connected to Israel and Zionism and Zionist causes and Mossad. As he said, Epstein actually knew 4 prime ministers. Ehud Barak was the closest one. But, a lot of the circumstantial evidence points to the fact that he was either a Mossad asset or had some connection to some Mossad schemes throughout history.
Right. Definitely Israel intelligence adjacent, and it speaks to the possibility of so many other blackmail options against Trump and raises so many questions. When you consider, for example, that Netanyahu, according to a new book, and this is something that we had seen reported going back to the 90s, reportedly used tapes he had recorded or Israeli intelligence had acquired of Bill Clinton cavorting with Monica Lewinsky to blackmail Bill Clinton into releasing the Israeli spy, former U.S. Naval Intelligence officer Jonathan Pollard. So there's a real pretext here.
Yeah, the story is that Netanyahu had tapes of Clinton engaging in, phone sex or whatever with Monica Lewinsky, and that Netanyahu held that over Clinton's head and said, release Pollard. Pollard was a CIA official within the United States that was spying for Israel. He was eventually released, and his handler was actually pardoned by Trump, I believe in one of Trump's last days in office in his first term. But this blackmail was attempted by Netanyahu against Clinton. It didn't work in that case, but ultimately both Pollard and his handler were released.
Wow. I fear that the Epstein imbroglio might begin to engulf Trump, and then he'll do something to get it off the front pages, which would be to start a war.
War or pivot to Russiagate, and I think some of the documents released had merit to them, but they're dangling out the fact that Comey and Brennan and Clapper and Obama were treasonous criminals engaged in this absurdity where they're trying to undermine the sitting president for treason, and they're not going to get prosecuted. I'll eat crow if I'm wrong. I'll be super happy if I eat crow and they actually charge some of these high-ranking officials, but I don't think it's going to happen. And I don't think it's going to happen despite Dan Bongino tweeting on Twitter saying that, what I've seen has changed me forever, and we're going to unveil the truth, not your truth, not their truth, but the truth. I don't see it happening, and the reason I don't see it happening is because they're memeing about it. They wouldn't have to meme about it with these pictures of the OJ Bronco chase, just replace Al Collins' face with Obama's if they were actually going to press charges and indict some of these people. They're not going to do that.
He'll bomb Iran again. He'll bomb Tehran. There'll be some pretext. When all else fails, they take you to war. Trump may follow. That's what I fear.
Well, just for reference, the book that I mentioned is by Daniel Halper, who was a neocon at the Weekly Standard, not a friend of the Clintons, but someone who would have sources in Israel. And the book is called Clinton Incorporated. So if anyone wants to check what I said, as far as I've been hearing this a lot, that Trump will seek to change the subject to a war with Iran, another wag the dog scenario.
Right.
Well, I mean, when Clinton did that during the Lewinsky saga, it was, what do they call it? Like pinpoint strikes. Like these were sort of symbolic strikes. You can't do a symbolic strike against Iran, and you would draw Israel in as well. And we're learning that Israel suffered much more structural damage, including to its oil refinery in Haifa, which is causing transportation problems across Israel, than we previously knew because of Israeli official censorship. When I talked to contacts in Iran, their sense was that they were actually winning a war of attrition and that they wanted to continue the war. And now there's a lot of anger at the reformist government because they believe that they stopped the war in order to reignite negotiations with the US. So it would make very little sense to me tactically for Trump to suddenly attack Iran on the grounds that it was still refining uranium. The American public would not support it. And I mean, just look at Trump's numbers. We started this interview with a look at Trump's numbers. I think Trump attacking Iran is also one key reason why the youth are turning against him and why Americans in general are turning against him.
Yeah, the war with Iran was a big mistake, and it won't discontinue itself from being a mistake, despite the fact that they celebrated that as a triumph. That is one key way in which I guess they could pivot from the Epstein scandal, which I believe will go down as this generation's JFK. This will be a scandal that lingers throughout generations and always raises questions when Americans will never really truly learn the answers that they deserve, especially from a presidential campaign that campaigned on transparency and bringing the truth amongst a swamp of criminals trying to hide the truth from the public. But that's what we're going to get. He made reference to, I think, Operation Infinite Reach there in 1998 when Clinton was embroiled in the Lewinsky scandal. 3 days after, I think, he testified in that scandal, they launched these targeted strikes against places in Afghanistan, ostensibly going after al-Qaeda hideouts, and that was seen as a diversionary tactic by Clinton to take the attention off the Lewinsky scandal. Well, Trump's tried to do that in many ways too, primarily from the Russiagate and the MLK files release, and I like both of those releases. I'm not going to lie about that. I think the American public deserved the MLK files far earlier than this, and it's a little bit alarming just in the fact that they had these in their back pocket to just kind of release in an opportunistic fashion just when it seemed to help Trump or get him away from talking about this story. That part of it seems weird to me. But in Russiagate, they're setting up another disappointment for Trump's base by dangling these people out there as criminals, and they're not going to press charges. I really don't think they are. Again, I'll eat crow if I'm wrong, but I don't think Clapper or Brennan or Comey or Obama are going down for this whatsoever, just like we're not going to get answers from the Epstein files. And sooner or later, this is really going to hurt Trump. I think we've already seen that it has. Major polls are indicating that a lot of his base is peeling off and having serious problems with the way he's dealing with this. Maybe they can be recaptured because the alternative is AOC or Newsom or something like that. Ultimately, a lot of people do pull the lever for their preferred candidate, but also a lot of the dissidents that supported Trump that didn't really have, an ideological dog in this race. They just thought Trump was better. I think they might ultimately stay home during the midterm elections, and this could linger that long in my mind. And Trump's base is actually pretty forgiving, I think. I think they would be forgiving of him if he's ended the war in Ukraine or U.S. involvement in it. He would have actually launched some of the Doge cuts that were projected, $2 trillion off of the debt, which, is laughable now. They didn't care about that at all. He dragged Musk over it and lied about saying that Musk only, was against the big beautiful bill because he wanted EV subsidies, and he didn't. He actually just wanted to cut some funding. And whether you think Musk is great or not, he certainly was more honest and genuine about wanting actual cuts than Trump ever was, that's for sure. You know, launching this new war in Iran, bombing Yemen for a month, all these things have eaten away, I think, at different segments of his support, different factions of it. And I don't think the Epstein case is any exception. And I think that Epstein is actually hurting him more than anything. So could he pivot? Yeah, I think he's mostly pivoted already. But the pivoting isn't going to ultimately help him if, again, no one goes down for these travesties. No heads roll. That's what's going to affect him more than anything else. So, yeah, thanks, Max. He brought up some good points about Epstein and the Israel connection there. We'll have to see how much this hurts Trump, but there's no doubt that questions linger, and the Israel connection is the element of this case that's being talked about the least. And, you know, Epstein and his arms trafficking past and his past in a role in one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history in the case of Towers Financial. You're not seeing almost anything about that outside of the dissonant sphere. So that's where we're at. Let me know down below. Do you think Epstein was a Mossad asset? Do you think that this is just, you know, Pandora's box and we'll never get to the bottom of it? Do you think there are more plausible explanations for why Trump might be pivoting from this? Let me know down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Judge Napolitano. I love his program, really enjoy Max being on it. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you'll support the channel and I'll appreciate you for that. And in return, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.